This is Dr. Carl, and I'm going to talk to you about making your best point the organizing principle for your sermon. Years and years ago, when I was a seminarian, and Dr. James Earl Massey was a professor of homiletics, he was asked in class the question of how many points should a good sermon have? And his answer was simply, at least one good one. We all laughed, but we got the message. Matter of fact, I would add to that one good one ought to organize your entire sermon. When you have your main point that really connects with the people, that is what should organize the whole sermon, because it will make it easier for you to remember the message as you preach it, and it will make it easier for the people to envision it. When you take that organizing principle, start with it, end with it, and interact with it throughout the message, it makes a cohesive whole. What you can do in any sermon is take your best point. It might be a story that's associated with it. It might be an image or an example, but you can take a part of that and bring it to the front of the sermon at the introduction, so that the life-engaging principle that you might consider to be your best point kicks off the message. What we so often do is we start the message with a lot of detail. We help people follow us in our study, but that's not the natural way to hear. The natural way to hear is to begin with the point of engagement and then incorporate the bits and pieces of information about study. Take something at the beginning, interact with it throughout your message, and then conclude, and it just kind of ties it all up together. When you start and end with the same image, people feel like they've gotten the big picture. I made an allusion to a dance in my sermon on the Holy Spirit in a previous lecture. In that sermon, I began with a confession that I can't dance, and I showed an image of a dance that you'd find in the movie, the classic movie of Sound of Music. And after showing that, I said, now I'd like for you to consider the words of keeping in step with the Spirit. And I explained the Spirit-filled life, always making reference to keeping in step with the Spirit. In the end, I even talked about the dip, when you lose total control over your life and you have to rely on God altogether. And people really grasped it. I didn't have to say anything more. Be ready for the dip. They already knew what it was. And then I concluded with the joy of keeping in step with the Spirit. There's other ways of doing that. In another sermon of a reconciliation, I talked about a counseling appointment that was done in general terms that wouldn't identify anybody. And I took a part of that, moved it to the beginning, and I asked the hearer, now what would you tell this couple if they came to you? And then I preached through the message of reconciliation from the book of Jonah, revisited that counseling appointment, and left it unfinished until the very end, and that's when we concluded what happened in that counseling appointment. The entire message was enveloped in this image, this scene, that kept the plot going. I encourage you to make your best point, usually one that applies most directly to your people, the organizing principle of your sermon, and in that way you will keep a master image and also find that it's easier for you to preach it, for you remember it in a picture, in a scene. May God bless you as you preach effectively and fruitfully about Jesus Christ.